USS Tautog, the second Tambor-class submarine, was the first U.S. Navy vessel named after the tautog, a small, edible sport fish also known as blackfish. She ranked among World War II's most successful submarines, credited with sinking 26 Japanese ships totaling 72,606 tons. This placed her second in ships sunk and 11th in tonnage, earning her the nickname, the Terrible T. Among the 12 Tambor-class submarines, she was one of only 5 to survive the war. She was launched on January 27, 1940, sponsored by Mrs. Hallie N. Edwards, wife of Captain Richard S. Edwards, commander of Submarine Squadron 2. The vessel was officially commissioned on July 3, 1940. After a brief training period in Long Island Sound, Tautog embarked on her shakedown cruise in the Caribbean Sea from the 6th of September to the 11th of November, 1940. She then returned to New London, Connecticut, operating from there until early February 1941, when she received orders to the Virgin Islands. In late April, she returned to New London, Connecticut, took on supplies, and departed with 2 other submarines for Hawaii on May 1st, stopping at Coco Solo in the Panama Canal Zone and San Diego, California. They reached Pearl Harbor on June 6, 1941. Tautog remained in Hawaiian waters until mid-October. On October 21st, she and USS Thresher set out under sealed orders for a 45-day simulated war patrol near Midway Island. For 38 days straight, both submarines operated submerged for 16 to 18 hours daily. Tautog returned to Pearl Harbor on December 5, 1941. 2 days later, on Sunday, December 7th, Tautog was moored at the submarine base when Japan launched its attack on Pearl Harbor. As the assault unfolded near Ford Island, Tautog's gun crews, assisted by Narwhal and a destroyer, downed a Japanese torpedo bomber as it flew over Mary Point. Tautog began her first war patrol on December 26, 1941, heading to the Marshall Islands for reconnaissance. After 26 days gathering intelligence, mainly on Kwajalein, she found no enemy presence at Rongelap, Bati, Wotho, or Bikini. On January 13, 1942, she fired 3 torpedoes at a small mine layer, but was countered with a depth charge attack. Hampered by a fogging periscope, she returned to Pearl Harbor on February 4th before being sent to Mare Island for maintenance. On April 9, 1942, Tautog departed for Hawaii, beginning her next war patrol 15 days later upon leaving Pearl Harbor. Her assigned patrol area was once again the Marshall Islands. Around 10 o'clock on April 26, near Johnston Island, she spotted the periscope of an enemy submarine maneuvering into an attack position. Reacting swiftly, Tautog made a sharp turn and fired a stern torpedo, which appeared to detonate above the target. She was officially credited with sinking RO-30, though RO-30 had been in 4th Reserve since December 1938 and was converted into a training hulk on April 1, 1942. She remained at the Otaki Submarine School until the war's end and was later scrapped. Fitzsimons does not verify the sinking of RO-30, and Japanese records report no submarines lost in any theater around April 1942. As of 2024, the only confirmed instance of one submerged submarine sinking another in combat remains HMS Venturer's destruction of U-864. Soon after arriving in the Marshalls, Tautog was ordered to Truk to intercept ships returning from the Battle of the Coral Sea. With a focus on the Japanese carriers Zuikaku and Shokaku, the latter codenamed Wounded Bear. However, due to an underestimation of Shokaku's speed by Pearl Harbor, Tautog and 2 other submarines arrived too late and missed her departure on the 11th or 12th of May. South of the harbor, Tautog fired 2 torpedoes at Goyomaru, scoring 1 hit but experiencing a circular run, a flaw of the erratic Mark 14 torpedo, forcing her to dive deep. Goyomaru later beached herself. 2 days later, Tautog received an ultra alert about 4 Japanese submarines returning from battle nearby. Caught off guard by the first, she failed to mount an attack. She detected the second submarine and fired 2 torpedoes, but when Tautog surfaced, the target was no longer visible. However, she was not officially credited with a sinking. Later that morning, she spotted another submarine with I-28, clearly marked on its conning tower. As I-28 fired at Tautog, the American sub quickly launched 2 torpedoes before diving to 150 feet to evade. 1 torpedo missed, but the second struck, sending I-28 to the bottom, making her the 3rd enemy submarine destroyed by Pacific Fleet subs. On May 22, Tautog spotted 2 ships departing Truk and launched a submerged sound attack on the larger vessel. Her crew believed they had sunk the target, but the 5,461-ton cargo ship Sanko Maru was only damaged. 3 days later, Tautog attacked another cargo ship from periscope depth, successfully sending Shoka Maru to the bottom. She ended her patrol at Fremantle on June 11. Initially credited with sinking 6 ships for 19,500 tons, her post-war tally was revised to 3 ships totaling 7,500 tons. On her 3rd war patrol from July 17 to September 10, 1942, Tautog operated off the coast of Indochina, where, due in part to torpedo shortages, she deployed mines. Hunting was scarce, and she managed to sink only 1 vessel, Ohio Maru, 5,900 tons, on August 6. Tautog underwent refitting by Holland at Albany, south of Fremantle. Loaded with mines once more, she departed on October 8, 1942. On October 20th, her lookouts spotted a faint silhouette through a rain squall. Submerging quickly, she identified the vessel as a 75-ton fishing schooner. Tautog surfaced, closed in, and fired a warning shot across the schooner's bow, forcing it to stop. The crew lowered the Japanese flag and raised a signal. An inspection found a Japanese crew and 4 Filipinos on board. The Filipinos swam to Tautog and later enlisted in the U.S. Navy. The Japanese refused to abandon ship, so Tautog fired 3 shells into the stern, disabling the rudder and propeller. Only then did the Japanese launch a boat, receiving water and directions to the nearest land. When Tautog began shelling to sink the schooner, more Japanese appeared and fled into the boat. 10 additional rounds left the vessel a burning wreck. On October 27th, Tautog shadowed a passenger cargo ship until nightfall before launching 2 torpedoes. The target caught fire aft, her bow lifted, and she sank within minutes, tentatively identified as Hokuango Maru, formerly the Chinese vessel Pei'an. The next day, a spread of torpedoes fired at another merchantman failed to detonate, with their dull impacts heard from the submarine. However, escort vessels spotted the torpedo trails and subjected Tautog to a heavy depth charge attack, though she escaped without major damage. On the night of November 2nd, she laid mines off Haiphong, Indochina, with several detonating during deployment. On November 11th, she fired at another passenger cargo ship but missed, drawing an escort's counterattack. A severe depth charge barrage followed, with 5 near explosions causing widespread minor damage. Tautog returned to Fremantle 10 days later for repairs and refitting. Initially credited with sinking 1 ship of 5,100 tons, post-war analysis reduced it to 4,000 tons. On her 5th war patrol from December 15, 1942 to January 30, 1943, Tautog operated in the Java Sea near Ambon, Timor, and Celebes Islands. On December 24th, she spotted a freighter in the Ombai Strait and pursued it until 3:06 a.m. the next morning, when she fired 3 stern torpedoes. 2 struck home, sinking Banshu Maru No. 2. Tautog dove deep and withdrew westward as enemy patrol boats searched for her, forcing her to remain submerged for 10 hours before they finally departed. That night, while heading for Aller Strait, Tautog spotted a vessel, initially believed to be a freighter, traveling west with an escort. As the targets abruptly changed course toward her, she identified them as an anti-submarine warfare team. Diving deep, she endured a heavy depth charge attack. On January 5, 1943, Tautog sighted a sail off her port bow and closed in, only to find a native craft carrying a dozen Muslim sailors, 4 women, several babies, some chickens, and a goat. After reviewing the ship's papers, her commander, William B. Seaglaff, allowed them to continue their journey. On January 9th at 8:38 a.m., using ultra-intelligence, Tautog sighted Notori, a Nagara-class cruiser off Ambon Island at 3,000 yards. 3 minutes later, she fired her first torpedo. At 9:43 a.m., a loud explosion was heard, and sonar reported the cruiser's screws had stopped. As Notori attempted to get underway at reduced speed, Tautog scored 2 more hits, but the cruiser fired back at her periscope with 5-inch guns, preventing further tracking. The damaged cruiser limped into Ambon. Later in the patrol, while in Salajar Strait, Tautog detected another cruiser using ultra-intelligence and fired 4 torpedoes in rough seas, but all missed. On January 22nd, she spotted a freighter in the Banda Sea and launched 3 torpedoes, sending the target to the bottom. The ship was later identified as Hashu Maru, a former Dutch passenger cargo vessel seized by the Japanese. Tautog then set course for Fremantle, where she received a warm welcome for her extreme aggressiveness. Initially credited with sinking 2 ships for 6,900 tons, her post-war tally was revised to 2 ships totaling 2,900 tons. Tautog's next patrol, from February 24th to April 19th, 1943, took her to Makassar Strait and the waters around Balikpapan, where she once again laid mines. On March 17th, she spotted a grounded tanker showing topside damage from an air attack. A well-placed torpedo near the stern triggered a secondary explosion, causing the ship to settle. She then fired 3 torpedoes at a freighter, but missed. On April 9th, in the Celebes Sea near Boston Island, Tautog encountered a 5-ship convoy. She sank the 5,214-ton freighter Penang Maru with 3 torpedoes, then targeted Isonami, a 1,750-ton destroyer, rescuing survivors, sinking it with 3 more torpedoes while missing with 3 others. During the patrol, she also engaged in 4 surfaced gun battles to test her newly acquired 5-inch 25 caliber gun, one of only 3 repurposed from an old V-boat. In the process, she destroyed a schooner, a sailboat, and a motor sampan. Despite 5 torpedo and 4 gun attacks, her confirmed wartime tally for this patrol was 2 ships totaling 6,800 to 7,000 tons. Tautog departed Fremantle on May 11, 1943 for a patrol covering the Flores Sea, the Gulf of Bonny, the Molucca Sea, the Celebes Sea, and the Moru Gulf. On May 20th, she used her deck guns to sink a sampan. On June 6th, she fired a spread of 3 torpedoes at a cargo ship near the entrance to Basilan Strait. 20 seconds after launch, the first torpedo struck, sending a yellow-green flash up amidships as Shine Maru went down. On June 20th, Tautog sank the 4,474-ton cargo ship Maiten Maru before ending her 53-day patrol at Pearl Harbor. Despite 6 torpedo and 3 gun attacks, she had limited success, with 2 confirmed sinkings for 14,300 tons, later reduced to 5,300 tons post-war. She was then ordered back to the U.S. for an overhaul at Hunters Point Navy Yard. After completing yard work, she conducted refresher training before heading back to Hawaii. On October 7, 1943, Tautog left Pearl Harbor for a patrol near the Palau Islands. On October 22nd, she surfaced near Fai's Island and shelled a phosphate plant. On November 4th, she sank submarine chaser number 30 and later damaged a tanker and 3 cargo ships. With her torpedoes depleted, Tautog shadowed a convoy for 2 days, relaying its position to Pearl Harbor before returning to Midway Island on November 18th. Tautog began her 9th war patrol on December 12, 1943, operating in Japanese home waters southeast of Shikoku Island and along Honshu's southern coast. On December 27th, she launched 3 torpedoes at a freighter and another spread at a passenger ship. However, the results remained unknown as enemy escorts forced her to dive and endure a 4-hour depth charge barrage with 99 explosives dropped around her. On January 3, 1944, Tautog targeted a cargo ship near the mouth of the Kumano-kawa River, just half a mile from the seawall. She fired 3 torpedoes before turning toward deeper waters. Raising her periscope, she saw an explosion send debris skyward, obscuring Saishu Maru as it sank. Detecting approaching high-speed propellers and a closing patrol plane, she quickly withdrew. The next day, Tautog made radar contact with a ship and tracked it while maneuvering into a favorable firing position. A generous spread of 6 torpedoes resulted in 4 hits, splitting Yusa Maru in half. When last seen, the cargo ship's bow and stern were both rising out of the water. On January 11th, Tautog intercepted 2 freighters, firing 3 torpedoes at the larger vessel and 1 at the second. Forced deep by escort ships, she detected timed explosions, suggesting a hit on each target. She was later credited with causing moderate damage to Kogyo Maru. Returning to Pearl Harbor on January 30th, she underwent refit by Bushnell and was credited with sinking 2 ships for 9,700 tons, later revised to 6,000 tons post-war. For her 10th war patrol, Tautog was assigned to the frigid northern Pacific, patrolling near the Kuril Islands from Paramushiro south to Japan's main islands and the northeast coast of Hokkaido. After refueling at Midway, she entered her patrol area on March 5, 1944. That same day, she suffered her only wartime casualty. While several crew members were performing emergency work on deck, a massive wave knocked them off their feet and swept newly assigned motor machinist's mate R.A. Laramie overboard. A thorough search was conducted, but he was never found. On March 13th, Tautog tracked a freighter and moved into an ideal attack position before launching 3 torpedoes from 1,500 yards. 2 struck Riwa Maru, bringing her to a stop, but she refused to sink even after Tautog fired 4 more torpedoes into what was dubbed the rubber ship. To conserve torpedoes, the submarine surfaced and attempted to finish the job with her 5-inch gun. As she did, another vessel appeared on the horizon, approaching to rescue survivors. Leaving her stubborn target behind, Tautog submerged and launched a spread of 3 torpedoes at the newcomer, sinking Shogen Maru, which went down much faster than her inexplicably resilient counterpart. As she made her way home on the night of March 16th, Tautog picked up a convoy of 7 ships on radar off Hokkaido. She maneuvered into position off their starboard flank, where 2 ships nearly overlapped, and fired a spread of 4 torpedoes. After witnessing the first torpedo explode against the nearest ship, Tautog was forced to dive by an escort but detected 2 timed detonations followed by breaking up noises and additional explosions. She pursued the remaining vessels and launched another attack from their starboard flank, firing 3 torpedoes at a medium-sized freighter and 4 at a second target. A Japanese destroyer quickly closed in, forcing her deep and subjecting her to a relentless 90-minute depth charge barrage. Tautog was officially credited with sinking the destroyer Shirakumo 1,750 tons and the passenger cargo ship Nichiren Maru, raising her patrol total to 5 ships for 17,700 tons, later revised post-war to 4 ships for 11,300 tons. It was one of the most aggressive and successful patrols of the war. She returned to Midway on March 23rd. During her next patrol from April 17th to May 21st, 1944, Tautog returned to the Kuril Islands. On May 2nd, she spotted a cargo ship anchored in a small harbor between Banjo-to and Matsuwa-to. From 2,000 yards, she fired 4 torpedoes, with one hit obscuring the target. An hour later, she launched 2 more, scoring another hit. The 5,973-ton Army cargo ship Ryoyo Maru settled in 24 feet of water with its decks awash. The following morning, in heavy fog, Tautog made radar contact, closed in, and fired 4 torpedoes. 2 struck home. As she circled for a follow-up shot, floating gasoline drums, debris, and life rafts made targeting difficult. When she last glimpsed Fushimi Maru, 5,000 tons, through the fog, its bow was rising into the air. On May 8th, amid swarms of ships, Tautog located a convoy heading for Esensaki. She targeted the largest ship in the convoy, landing one hit that slowed the vessel before 2 more torpedoes sent Miyazaki Maru, 4,000 tons, sinking by the stern. Escorts forced Tautog deep and pounded her with depth charges for 7 hours, but she emerged unscathed. At dawn on May 9th, she fired at another freighter but missed. 3 days later, she launched her last 3 torpedoes at Banai Maru No. 2, 1,100 tons, and watched as the ship vanished in a cloud of smoke. Returning to Pearl Harbor, Tautog was credited with sinking 4 ships for 20,500 tons, later revised post-war to 16,100 tons. On June 23, 1944, Tautog left Pearl Harbor for Japanese waters, assigned to patrol the eastern coasts of Honshu and Hokkaido. On July 8, she disabled a small freighter with a spread of torpedoes, then fired another volley to finish the job. A lone survivor brought aboard the submarine identified the vessel as Matsu Maru, which had been carrying lumber from Tokyo to Muroran. The next day, while patrolling near Shimusu Shima, Tautog spotted a ship on the horizon. She submerged, closed in, and identified it as a coastal steamer. Surfacing, she fired 21 rounds from her 5-inch gun, igniting a fire and triggering an explosion that blew off the vessel's stern. She then rescued 6 survivors from a swamped lifeboat, who identified their ship as Hokoryu Maru, en route from the Bonin Islands to Tokyo with a cargo of coconut oil. On August 2nd, Tautog spotted several ships near Mikisaki and closed in on a freighter, firing 3 torpedoes from 800 yards. The first struck, triggering a secondary explosion that obscured the target, while the second sent up a column of black smoke. When the air cleared, the cargo ship Kone Maru had vanished beneath the waves. Briefly pursued by escorts, Tautog successfully evaded them and set course for Midway. She arrived there on August 10th, credited with a disappointing 2 ships for 4,300 tons, later revised post-war to 2,800. She was then ordered back to the United States for an overhaul. Tautog returned to Pearl Harbor in early December and, on December 17, 1944, embarked on her 13th and final war patrol. After stopping at Midway and Saipan, she took up station in the East China Sea alongside Silversides. On January 17, 1945, she spotted an approaching ship, maneuvered into position, and fired a spread of 3 torpedoes. One hit tore off the enemy's bow. She then fired another torpedo from 700 yards, completely destroying the loaded troopship, Transport No. 15. On January 20th, under bright moonlight, Tautog detected an enemy ship at 10,000 yards. She positioned herself to silhouette the target against the moon, launched 2 torpedoes, and watched the vessel sink. Approaching the wreckage, she rescued a lone survivor, who identified the ship as the motor torpedo boat tender Shuri Maru, 1,800 tons, en route from Tsingtao to Sasebo. The next day, she damaged a tanker but was forced to evade approaching escorts before assessing the damage. En route to Midway, she used her deck guns to sink a wooden trawler. Her final patrol tally was 3 ships for 8,500 tons, later revised post-war to 2 ships totaling 3,300 tons. Tautog completed her patrol at Midway on February 1, 1945, and was reassigned to training duty. On March 2nd, she moved to Pearl Harbor, where she spent a month assisting aircraft in anti-submarine warfare exercises before departing for the United States. Arriving in San Diego on April 9th, she worked with the University of California's Department of War Research, testing newly developed equipment aimed at improving submarine safety. On September 7th, she departed for San Francisco to join the Pacific Reserve Fleet. However, her orders were later revised, and on October 31st, she set course for the East Coast. Tautog arrived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on November 18th and was decommissioned on December 8, 1945. Tautog was awarded 14 battle stars and the Navy Unit Commendation for her service during the Second World War. Plans to use Tautog as a target in the 1946 atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll were canceled, and she was reassigned to the 9th Naval District on May 9, 1947, as a reserve training vessel. Towed to Wisconsin, she arrived in Milwaukee on December 26, 1947, where she remained stationed at the Great Lakes Naval Reserve Training Center for the next decade. Tautog was decommissioned and removed from the Naval Vessel Register on September 11, 1959. On November 15, 1959, she was sold for scrap to the Bultima Dock and Dredge Company in Manistee, Michigan. An unceremonious end for a distinguished boat.